Tom Granger had always liked quiet places. After spending over 30 years fixing engines in a noisy garage, he was more than ready for peace and calm. When he retired, he moved with his wife, Linda, into a small neighborhood just outside the city. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean, friendly, and close to nature. The best part? A little lake at the edge of town that looked like something out of a painting. Every evening, Tom would grab his old fishing rod, pack a thermos of coffee, and walk down to the lake. He'd sit on a worn-out folding chair, cast his line into the water, and watch the sun dip behind the trees. Sometimes he caught fish, sometimes he didn't. But that wasn't really the point. Fishing made him feel free. It gave him time to think, to relax, and to enjoy life after years of hard work. The neighbors knew him. Kids waved when they passed by on their bikes. Some even stopped to ask about the fish he caught or how long he thought it would take before the frogs started singing again in spring. Tom loved that. He felt like part of something bigger than himself, part of the land, part of the community. But not everyone shared his love for the lake. The neighborhood had an HOA, a homeowners association. It was one of those groups that made rules about everything: what color your mailbox could be, how high your grass could grow, and whether or not you could hang holiday lights past January 2nd. Most people didn't mind too much. Rules kept, things neat and orderly. Then came the day everything changed. It was a warm Thursday afternoon. Tom was sitting near the water's edge, watching his bobber gently float up and down in the breeze. He was thinking about grilling some fish for dinner when he heard footsteps crunching through the dry leaves nearby. "Mr. Granger?" A voice called. Tom turned around and saw two men walking toward him. One wore a crisp button-down shirt and carried a clipboard. The other was older, with a serious look on his face. "Yes?" Tom asked, setting his rod aside. "I'm Mr. Delaney from the HOA," the man with the clipboard said. "And this is Mr. Patel, our legal advisor." Tom blinked. "Legal advisor? For what?" "We've received several complaints," Delaney continued, flipping through some papers. "It seems you've been fishing here regularly." Tom nodded slowly. "Yeah, I come here most days. It's peaceful, and there's plenty of fish." "Well," Mr. Patel said, stepping forward, "the board has decided that fishing is no longer permitted on the lake." Tom stared at them. "What?" "You heard right," Delaney said. "Effective immediately, all fishing must stop. The lake is part of the common area, and we've determined it's best used for aesthetic purposes only." "Aesthetic?" Tom repeated, almost laughing. "You're turning it into a pond garden?" "No," Patel said calmly. "We're preserving its natural beauty. Allowing fishing can damage the ecosystem, create litter, and cause safety issues." Tom shook his head. "I've been coming here for years. No one ever said anything before. There's no trash. I don't pull fish out by the hundreds. I just catch a few for dinner now and then." Delaney cleared his throat. "Times change, Mr. Granger. We have new guidelines. If you continue fishing, we'll be forced to take further action." "What kind of action?" Tom asked, standing up now. "Fines," Patel said simply. "Possible removal from the property if necessary." Tom couldn't believe what he was hearing. "So because some people complain, I can't enjoy the lake anymore? That's not fair." Delaney shrugged. "Fairness isn't the issue, compliance is." They turned and walked away, leaving Tom alone by the water. His hands were shaking slightly as he picked up his rod. He looked at the lake, the same lake he had visited nearly every day for years. And suddenly it felt different. Like it didn't belong to him anymore. That night, Tom sat at his kitchen table staring at his untouched dinner. Linda watched him carefully. "They told me I can't fish anymore," he finally said. She frowned. "Why?" "Said it's against the rules now. Something about protecting the lake." "That doesn't make sense," she replied. "You never hurt anything. You always clean up after yourself." "I know," Tom said quietly. "But they don't care. They just want control." Over the next few weeks, Tom tried to fight back. He showed up at HOA meetings, politely asking why such a harmless activity was suddenly banned. He brought up how many people enjoyed the lake, how families taught their kids to fish there, how it was part of the neighborhood's charm. But the HOA wouldn't budge. They claimed the decision was final. Some members even accused Tom of being stubborn and disruptive. Others avoided eye contact when he walked by. Still, Tom refused to give up completely. He kept going to the lake, not fishing, just sitting, watching, thinking, letting the wind blow through his hair and the birds sing overhead. But the joy was gone. Every time he looked at the water, he remembered the rule that had taken away something simple and good. One rainy afternoon, while flipping through some local news online, Tom stumbled across an article that caught his attention. It was about a man who bought a small island to protect it from development. Tom chuckled at first. Buying an island just to save it? What a strange idea. But then he read something else. The community lake was originally privately owned. Before being transferred to the developer, he leaned closer to the screen. Though managed by the HOA, the lake itself remains technically under private ownership. It will soon be listed for sale as part of a land portfolio auction. Tom's heart began to race. Could it be true? He clicked. The link, read more articles, dug deeper. The more he learned, the more excited he became. If the lake wasn't fully owned by the HOA, if it was still available, maybe there was a way to get it back. Not just for himself, but for everyone who loved it. That night, Tom stayed up late, scribbling notes on a pad of paper. He calculated how much money he might need. He thought about who might help him, his granddaughter who was studying law, or his neighbor who used to handle real estate deals. For the first time in weeks, he smiled. Maybe he couldn't fight the HOA head-on, but maybe, just maybe, he could buy the lake. And if he did, well, then he would be the one making the rules. Tom didn't sleep much that night. His mind was spinning like the wheels of an old truck stuck in mud. He kept thinking about the article he had read, the one that said the lake wasn't actually owned by the HOA, that it was still private property and soon it would be up for sale. The next morning, Tom made coffee strong enough to wake the dead and sat at his kitchen table with a notebook and pen. He started writing down everything he could remember from the article. Names, dates, companies involved, anything that might help him find more information. He called his granddaughter Emily, who was studying law at the local university. "Hey, Gramps," she said when she answered. "What's up?" "Emily," Tom said, excitement already in his voice. "I need your help with something important." She laughed. "Okay, what is it this time? Did you forget how to use email again?" No, he said quickly. "It's about the lake, I think. I think I can buy it." There was silence on the other end for a moment. "You're kidding, right?" she asked. "I'm serious," Tom said. "It's not owned by the HOA. It's part of some land portfolio that's going up for auction. If I can get the money together, I might be able to buy it." Emily paused again, then said, "Wait, if that's true, that's huge. Let me look into it." By the end of the day, Emily had found more details online and sent them to Tom. She explained that the lake was once owned by a developer who never officially transferred full ownership to the HOA. It had just been sitting in a list of leftover properties the company was selling off. That meant the lake was technically still available to anyone who could afford it. Tom stared at the screen, heart pounding. This was real. Over. The next few weeks, Tom turned from a quiet retiree into a man on a mission. He spent hours researching auctions, legal documents, and property laws. He talked to neighbors asking if they'd ever heard stories about who really owned the lake. Most people had no idea. They just assumed the HOA controlled everything. Then came the biggest challenge. Money. Buying a piece of land. Even a small lake wasn't cheap. The starting bid was $45,000. Tom had saved a little over $20,000 after retirement. He could take out a loan, but banks didn't usually hand out cash for someone buying a lake so they could fish. Emily suggested, "Crowdfunding, what's that again?" Tom asked. "It's where regular people donate money to support a cause or project," she explained. "You tell your story online, and if people like it, they give you money to help." Tom thought about it for a minute. "So I just ask strangers to give me money?" "Well, yeah," she said, "but you have to make them care. And care. They did. With Emily's help, Tom launched a campaign titled, "Let the People Fish." He posted a short video explaining how the HOA had taken away something simple and good. He showed pictures of the lake, of kids learning to cast, a line of families enjoying picnics by the water. He told his story honestly, without anger. Just a man who loved the lake and wanted to protect it. Within days, donations started rolling in. Neighbors gave $20 here, $50 there. Some left comments saying they remembered fishing there as kids. A few even offered to help with legal fees or advertising. One woman wrote, "My dad used to take me fishing there every weekend. After he passed, I couldn't bring myself to go back. If you can save this place, you'll be doing more than just letting people fish. You'll be keeping memories alive." Tom read that message twice, then wiped his eyes with the sleeve of his shirt. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for everyone who had ever felt the joy of that lake. Word spread fast. Local news picked up the story. A reporter named Sarah Thompson visited Tom one afternoon and asked him questions about his plan. "So you want to buy a lake because you were told you couldn't fish?" she asked, trying to hide a smile. "That's right," Tom said. "Seems silly, doesn't it? But that lake means something to people, and I'm tired of watching rules chase away simple joys." Her story ran the next day with the headline, "Retired Mechanic Launches Campaign to Buy Neighborhood Lake After Fishing." Bang. More donations came in. Even people outside the town began giving. Some added funny notes. "If you win, let me come catch a catfish. Buy that lake and name it Tom's Revenge. I've never met you, but I'm proud of you." Tom printed out those messages and taped them to his fridge. He wasn't alone. Still, the HOA wasn't happy. At their next meeting, Mr. Delaney stood up and addressed the crowd. "This campaign is misleading," he said. "Mr. Granger is attempting to gain control of the lake under false pretenses. He claims to act in the community's best interest, but in reality, he seeks personal control over shared property." Some nodded, others whispered. Delaney continued, "Allowing one individual to own the lake opens the door to chaos. What if he decides to charge entry or build a restaurant? We must prevent this." A few members clapped, but then someone unexpected spoke up. Mrs. Harper, an older woman who rarely said a word at meetings, raised her hand. "I've lived here 30 years, she said. "I've watched my grandchildren grow up playing by that lake. I don't see why one man shouldn't be allowed to protect it, especially when the HOA only wants to lock it away behind rules." Another neighbor, a young dad named Jason, stood up. "My son caught his first fish there last summer," he said. "We all use that lake. Maybe it's time we had a say in what happens to it." The room buzzed with conversation. Tom sat quietly, listening. He didn't need to say anything. His actions had already spoken louder than words. As the auction date approached, Tom worked harder than ever. He met with lawyers, reviewed contracts, and made sure every document was in order. Emily helped him write a letter stating his intentions. The lake would remain open to the public, free for all to enjoy. He wouldn't turn it into a private playground. He wouldn't sell it off. He just wanted to protect it. From greed, from rules, from being forgotten. On the final night before the auction, Tom sat by the lake once more. The wind was calm. The stars were bright. He looked out at the water, remembering all the evenings he had spent there, the laughter, the quiet, the peace. Tomorrow, everything could change. But whatever happened, he knew one thing for sure. He had already won the hearts of the people. The morning of the auction arrived like the calm before a storm. Tom woke up early, made himself a strong cup of coffee, and stared out the window at the quiet neighborhood. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, but he could already feel the weight of what was about to happen. He wasn't just going to try and buy a lake, he was going to take on the HOA and win. Emily picked him up in her small red car. She had taken the day off from school to help him. "You ready?" she asked as he climbed in. Tom gave a slow nod. "As I'll ever be." They drove into town together, the radio playing soft music in the background. Along the way, they passed the lake. A few kids were already there, skipping stones across the water. One of them waved when he saw Tom. That wave stuck with him. It reminded him why he was doing this. The auction took place in a small conference room above the local courthouse. People were already sitting in rows when Tom and Emily walked in. At the front stood a man in a suit who would be running the event. On the table beside him were folders filled with property details. Tom scanned the crowd. There, sitting near the back, were Mr. Delaney and Mr. Patel from the HOA. Tom's stomach tightened. He had expected competition, but seeing them there made it real. The auction began with other properties: old warehouses, empty fields, a closed-down gas station. Then came the item everyone had been waiting for. Lot number 47, community lake and surrounding land. The man in the suit tapped his gavel. "We start the bidding at $45,000, he announced. A voice called out, "46,000. It was one of the HOA lawyers. Tom didn't flinch. He raised his hand. $47,000. Another bid came from a developer in the corner. $50,000. Tom looked at Emily. She nodded. $52,000, he said calmly. The HOA lawyer tried again. $55,000. Tom took a deep breath. That was more than he had planned to spend. But he knew if he backed down now, the lake would fall into the wrong hands. He raised his hand once more. $57,000. Silence filled the room. No one else bid. The door. Man in the suit looked around. Going once, going twice, bang. Sold to Mr. Granger for $57,000. For a moment, no one moved. Then Emily grabbed Tom's arm and squeezed. "You did it." Tom sat still, stunned. It was over. He owned the lake. News spread fast. By the time Tom got home, neighbors were already waiting outside. Some brought signs that read, "Thank you, Tom, and let the people fish." Others simply wanted to shake his hand. Mrs. Harper hugged him tightly. "I knew you could do it." Jason, the young dad, smiled. "So does this mean we can fish again?" Tom laughed. "You better believe it." But not everyone was happy. Later that week, the HOA called an emergency meeting. They claimed Tom's ownership of the lake violated community rules and threatened legal action. Mr. Delaney spoke to reporters outside their office. "This is dangerous," he said. "One man shouldn't have control over something that belongs to all of us." Inside the meeting, members argued fiercely. Some supported Tom. Others demanded the HOA find a way to take the lake back. Delaney leaned forward. "We must act quickly. If we don't, this sets a bad precedent." But then, someone unexpected stood up. An older woman named Ms. Lang, who rarely spoke at meetings, cleared her throat. "I've lived here 20 years, she said. "And in all that time, the HOA has told us where we can plant trees, how high our grass should be, and even what color our shutters should be. But not once have they asked us what we want." She turned to face Tom. But he listened. He fought for something we all love. And now, instead of respecting that, you want to fight him? Over a lake? A few people clapped. Others nodded. Delaney opened his mouth to respond, but no one seemed interested in hearing it. The meeting ended without resolution, and the HOA's power was beginning to crack. Over the next few weeks, Tom worked hard to make good on his promise. With help from donations and a small loan, he cleaned up the shoreline, fixed the broken dock, and put up benches where people could sit and enjoy the view. He installed a small sign at the entrance that read, "Welcome to Granger Lake, free fishing for all." He didn't charge anyone to use it. He didn't build fences. He simply opened the gates and let life return to the water. Families came back. Kids cast lines into the lake again. Elderly couples sat on blankets watching the ducks swim by. Everything felt right again. But the HOA wasn't done yet. They filed a formal complaint with the city council, claiming Tom's ownership of the lake created a safety risk and violated zoning laws. They even tried to get a judge to block access, but every time they pushed, the community pushed back harder. Neighbors wrote letters. Students from the local high school held a protest outside the HOA office. A group of teenagers painted a mural on the fence that read, "Let the people fish, let the people live." Reporters showed up again. This time the headline read, "Retired mechanic turns into local hero after buying lake for community." As the days turned into weeks, Tom found himself smiling more. He wasn't just the guy who liked to fish anymore. He was the man who had stood up to the rules and won. One evening he sat by the lake, rod in hand, line in the water. Beside him sat Jason's son, holding his own tiny fishing pole. "You really bought this whole lake?" the boy asked. Tom chuckled. "Yeah, I guess I did." The boy grinned. "Cool." Tom looked out across the water. The wind was gentle, the sky was clear, and for the first time in a long while, everything felt exactly as it should. The victory felt sweet, but Tom knew it wasn't over yet. Just because he had bought the lake didn't mean everyone was happy about it, especially not the HOA. Mr. Delaney and Mr. Patel were still angry. They met behind closed doors, made phone calls, and tried to find ways to take control back. They sent letters to city officials, they talked to lawyers. They even tried to get the town council to step in. But something strange started happening. People began to ignore them. Neighbors stopped showing up to their meetings. When they passed each other on the street, no one waved anymore. The HOA newsletter suddenly had fewer readers. People who used to nod politely now turned away when Delaney walked by. Tom wasn't causing trouble. He was just living his life. And that made all the difference. One Saturday morning, Tom hosted the first official event at Granger Lake. Open fishing day for families. He set up tables near the shore, brought in some folding chairs, and handed out free hot dogs and lemonade. A local radio station showed up to cover it. So did a reporter from the town paper. Kids ran around barefoot, casting lines into the water with excitement. Parents sat together, laughing and sharing stories. Some older folks brought lawn chairs and watched everything unfold with warm smiles. It was peaceful, it was joyful, and it was real. Emily stood beside her grandfather, watching the crowd grow. "This is amazing," she said. Tom nodded. "Feels like this place finally belongs to the people again." A little boy came running up, holding a small fish in his net. "Look what I caught," he shouted. Tom crouched down. "That's a fine catch, son. You want to keep him or let him go?" The boy looked at the fish, then gently released it back into the lake. "I'll come see you again," he whispered before running off. Tom chuckled and stood back up. "You know," Emily said, "you've done more than just save a lake. You've changed how people think." Tom shrugged. "I just wanted to fish." She smiled. "Well, now we all can." But while the lake was full of laughter, the HOA office was full of frustration. Inside, Mr. Delaney paced back and forth in front of a whiteboard filled with notes. "They're treating him like a hero," he muttered, "like he did something noble." Mr. Patel sat at the table flipping through papers. "We need to act fast. If we don't push back now, we lose control completely." Delaney stopped pacing. "Then we do more than complain. We make them regret this." They decided to try something new. Instead of arguing about rules, they would claim safety issues. They hired an environmental expert, someone who could say the lake was being mismanaged. They wrote a report saying the public access was harming wildlife. They even claimed there was a risk of disease spreading due to poor maintenance. It was mostly untrue, but they hoped it would scare people. And for a moment, it worked. Some parents kept their kids home from the lake. A few neighbors asked Tom if the reports were true. He didn't panic. Instead, he invited scientists from a local college to test the water and study the ecosystem. He gave them full access to everything. When the results came back, they were clear. The lake was healthier than it had been in years. Wildlife was thriving. Fish populations were balanced. Water quality was good. Tom shared the findings online. Within days, the HOA's claims fell apart. Even the local news called them out for using fear tactics. More people came to the lake than ever before, and the HOA's power continued to shrink. Despite the setbacks, Delaney refused to give up. At the next community meeting, he stood up and addressed the crowd. "We cannot allow this situation to continue," he said. This is not how communities are supposed to work. Rules exist for a reason. Without order, we fall into chaos. A few people clapped. But then Mrs. Harper, the same woman who had spoken up before, raised her hand. "I've lived here 30 years, she said. "And in all that time, the HOA has told us what color our houses should be, how high our grass should grow, and where we can park our cars. But never once have they asked us what we want." She turned to face the room. But Tom did. He listened. He fought. And now we have a lake that belongs to us again. There was a pause. Then someone started clapping. Then another. Soon, the whole room was filled with applause. Delaney's face turned red. He tried to speak again, but no one was listening. The meeting ended early, and the HOA's influence was fading fast. As the months passed, life around the lake grew better. Tom started hosting monthly events, fishing tournaments, cleanup days, even nature lessons for school kids. He partnered with a local teacher to create a program where students could learn about ecosystems, pollution, and conservation. They built birdhouses together, planted trees along the shoreline, and tested the water for bugs and plants. It became part of the school curriculum. Kids loved it. Parents loved it. Even the mayor came to visit. He shook Tom's hand and said, "You've created something special here." Tom just smiled. "I just wanted to fish." But while things were going well for Tom, things were falling apart for the HOA. Fewer people paid their fees. Meetings had lower turnout. Eventually, Delaney stepped down. No one replaced him. Without leadership, the HOA slowly faded away. A new group formed, one made up of regular neighbors, not rule makers. They called themselves the Community Care Council. They didn't write strict laws or send out fines. Instead, they worked together to solve problems and improve the neighborhood. They even voted to officially recognize Granger Lake as a public space. Tom was invited to speak at the first meeting. He didn't give a long speech, he just said, "Let's take care of this place, together." And everyone agreed. By the end of the year, the lake had become more than just a place to fish. It was a symbol of freedom, of standing up for what's right, of doing something bold, not for power, but for love. Tom still went there every evening. Sometimes he fished. Sometimes he just sat and watched the sunset. Either way, he always smiled, because the lake was where he belonged, and now, so was everyone else. Years passed, and life at Granger Lake kept getting better. Tom still came every evening just like he used to. He'd sit on his old folding chair, coffee by his side, fishing rod in hand. The lake shimmered under the setting sun, ducks gliding. Across the surface, frogs croaking from the reeds. To most people, it was peaceful. To Tom, it was perfect. He wasn't just a retiree anymore. He had become a local legend. Kids who once caught their first fish at the lake now brought their kids there. Teenagers who had grown up learning about nature under Tom's guidance went off to college and wrote stories about him in school reports. One paper even called him the guardian of the lake. But Tom never let it go to his head. He just kept doing what he loved, helping others enjoy the water, fixing broken benches, teaching kids how to cast a line properly, and sometimes just sitting quietly, watching the world turn. And the best part? He didn't have to fight for the lake anymore. It belonged to everyone now. Every spring, the town held an event called the Granger Lake Festival. It started small, just a few booths, some music, and a fish fry. But over time, it grew into something much bigger. Local bands played by the water. Food trucks lined the road. Artists painted the lake in bright colors on big canvases. Kids raced paper boats they made themselves. There were races, crafts, storytelling sessions, and even a special contest where you could enter your biggest catch, but only if you promised to release it afterward. The festival was more than fun. It was a celebration of community, of standing together, and of the simple joy that comes from fighting for something good. At the start of each festival, someone always handed Tom the microphone and asked him to speak. He never gave long speeches. He just smiled, looked out at all the happy faces, and said the same thing every year. "This lake has always been here. All I did was remind people it was theirs to enjoy." Then he would wave, hand the mic back, and find a quiet place to sit while everyone else danced and laughed. Over time, the story of how Tom beat the HOA spread far beyond the town. Reporters from other cities came to visit. Some called him a hero. Others said he was proof that one person could make a real difference. A filmmaker even reached out asking if he could make a short movie about the whole thing. Tom laughed when he got the call. "Me? In a movie?" he said. Emily begged him to. "Say yes. It's not about you," she told him. "It's about what you stood for." So he agreed. The film came out a year later. It showed how the HOA had tried to control everything, how people had fought back, and how one man's love for a quiet lake had changed the entire neighborhood. It won a small award at a local film festival. People talked about it online. Some teachers even showed it in class to talk about civic rights and community action. Tom watched it once and then shrugged. "I still just wanted to fish," he said. As the years rolled on, the lake stayed healthy and lively, thanks to the people, who loved it. Tom worked with schools, scouts, and volunteers to plant trees, clean the shoreline, and protect wildlife. Local students even created a little museum near the dock, a wooden shed filled with photos, signs, and newspaper clippings from the battle to save the lake. One wall had a timeline showing every step of the journey, from the day the HOA banned fishing to the final victory when Tom bought the lake. In the center hung a framed copy of the front page of the town paper the day after the auction. "Retired mechanic becomes lake owner. Town celebrates." Visitors loved it. Tourists came from nearby towns just to see the place, and Tom, he welcomed them all. He'd shake hands, tell a few stories, maybe give a kid a tip on how to bait a hook. Then he'd walk down to the edge of the water and sit again, because that's where he felt most at peace. Eventually, the Homeowners Association faded away completely. Without Delaney to lead it and without support from the neighbors, it simply stopped meeting. No one missed it. Instead, the Community Care Council took its place. They met once a month in the town hall. Anyone could join. They voted on decisions together, and Tom was invited as a guest speaker whenever they discussed the lake. He never tried to take charge. He just reminded them of the same lesson he had learned. You don't need rules to protect something beautiful. You just need people who care. By the time Tom turned 75, he couldn't fish every day like he used to. His knees hurt more than before, his eyes weren't as sharp. But he still came to the lake nearly every week. Sometimes he just sat and watched. Sometimes he helped children tie knots or pick the right kind of lure. And sometimes he told stories about how this place had once been taken away, and how it had been won back. Not with weapons, not with money, but with hope, with courage, and with the belief that something as simple as fishing could change the world. One summer evening, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, Tom sat alone by the water. The breeze was cool. The birds sang softly. He closed his eyes and listened. Somewhere behind him, a group of teenagers laughed and skipped stones across the lake. A young couple walked hand in hand along the shore. A father helped his little girl reel in her first fish. Tom smiled. He looked out at the water. And in that moment, he knew he had done something important. Not because he owned the lake, but because he had made sure it would always belong to the people.